My name is Lauren Whitmore, and I'm 38 years old. That morning, I was standing at the stove making breakfast, flipping eggs with the kind of absent-minded focus that comes from repetition. The kitchen smelled like butter and coffee. The house was quiet in that early, earned way. No slammed doors, no accusations yet. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft clink of a spatula against ceramic. I didn't know I was already standing in the middle of a crime scene. I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, heavy, purposeful. I didn't turn around before he spoke. "Who is this?" My boyfriend Mark was standing in the doorway holding my phone like it had burned him. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp and awake in a way that had nothing to do with the morning. He thrust the screen toward me. A single message glowed between his fingers. "Can we talk later? I really need to discuss something important with you privately." No name, just a number. My stomach didn't drop, it didn't race. That reaction had burned out years ago. "Who is she?" Mark demanded. "Are you cheating on me?" I looked at the screen, then at him. I said nothing. That silence was a mistake. "So that's it?" His voice rose instantly. "You don't even deny it?" I turned back to the stove and flipped the eggs. "Answer me, Lauren." "You already decided," I said calmly. "What's the point?" His face flushed. "I knew it. You've been acting distant, secretive. Now this?" "Call the number," I said. He blinked. "What? You want to know who it is?" I kept my voice even. "Call the number." "That's your defense?" He laughed sharply. "You want me to confront your mistress?" I shrugged. "Put it on speaker." He didn't hesitate. His thumb slammed the call button like he was finally about to win. 1 ring. 2. Then, "Hello, Dad?" The voice came through clear and confused. Everything stopped. Mark's face drained of color. "Why are you calling me from Mom's phone?" our daughter Emily asked. "Are you going through her phone again?" The silence that followed was absolute. "Dad?" Emily pressed. "We talked about this." Mark's mouth opened, closed. I turned off the stove. "Emily," he said finally, too fast. "Why are you texting your mom from a different number?" "Because I got a new phone," she replied. "You were literally there when we bought it yesterday." He looked at me. I didn't help him. "I told Mom I'd text her my new number," Emily continued, "but I wanted to talk to her privately." Mark swallowed. "About what?" A long breath on the other end of the line. "About you," Emily said. My chest tightened. "About the constant accusations. The phone checking. The way you don't trust her at all." Her voice shook. "I was going to ask Mom if we could do family therapy because this is getting out of control." Mark stared at the floor. "I'm at practice," Emily added. "Can you please stop going through Mom's phone? It's embarrassing. My friends think you're out of control." Then the line went dead. Mark stood there holding my phone like it had betrayed him. I went back to the counter and slid the eggs onto a plate. I thought," he started. "I know what you thought," I said. "You always do." He finally looked at me. "Why didn't you just tell me it was Emily?" "Why did you go through my phone?" I asked. "I have a right to." "No," I said quietly. "You don't." Something cracked in his expression, but it wasn't remorse. It was confusion, like he'd expected me to comfort him. This had been building for years. And that morning, something in me finally stopped trying to survive it. I didn't say anything else after that. Not because I didn't have more to say. God, I had years of it stacked inside me like old boxes in an attic. But because I'd learned something about Mark Storms. If I spoke while he was still looking for a way to be the victim, he'd use my words as proof that I was emotional, unreasonable, overreacting. So I stayed quiet, plated breakfast like this was still a normal home, and watched him stand there holding my phone as if it might confess to something on its own. Mark finally set it down on the counter, gently, like he was doing me a favor by not throwing it. "You didn't have to humiliate me," he said, voice low. That sentence landed in my chest like a pebble thrown into deep water. Small sound, huge ripple. I turned slowly. "I didn't humiliate you." He scoffed. "Emily, she thinks I'm crazy now." I stared at him for a long second, searching his face for the place where reality lived. "Mark," I said carefully, "Emily already thought that." His eyes flashed. "Don't say that. She's a kid. She doesn't understand adult relationships." "She understands what it's like to walk on eggshells," I said, pushing the plate toward the table. "She understands what it's like to hear you accuse me of things that aren't real. She understands that you go through my phone like I'm guilty." Mark's nostrils flared. He pulled out a chair and sat down hard, like he'd decided he was going to ride this out by sheer stubbornness. "I'm not accusing you," he insisted. "You did," I cut in, still calm. "You called me a cheater in my own kitchen while I was making you breakfast." He opened his mouth, but I kept going, because the words were finally moving, and I wasn't going to stop them just to make him comfortable. "You didn't ask if the number was Emily. You didn't ask if it was a work thing. You didn't ask anything. You saw an unknown number, and you went straight to the worst version of me." Mark rubbed his forehead, like he was the one with a headache. "That text, Lauren, it looks suspicious." "A text asking to talk privately is not suspicious," I said. "It's normal. People have private conversations. Not everything is evidence." He leaned back, crossing his arms. Defensive posture, familiar armor. "You've been distant lately," he said. "You've been on your phone more. I've been tired," I corrected, "because you exhaust me." That one hit. I saw it in the way his eyes narrowed, the way he suddenly stopped blinking. "You're making me sound like some kind of monster." I let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh, but it didn't have any humor in it. "I'm not making you sound like anything," I said. "I'm describing what you do." He pushed his chair back an inch, like the floor itself was accusing him. "I just need reassurance," he said. "Is that so horrible? I care about our relationship." Me caring about our relationship, I thought, would look like trust, like not treating your girlfriend like a suspect every time her phone vibrates. But I didn't say that out loud yet, not all at once. Because if I emptied the whole truth onto the table in one go, he'd flip it over. Instead, I reached for the coffee pot and poured myself a cup first. That's how you know something in you has changed. When you start doing the practical things while someone else is panicking. When you realize their drama isn't the center of the universe anymore. Mark watched me pour coffee like it was betrayal in liquid form. "You didn't even look surprised," he said. I glanced at him over the rim of my mug, because it's always this. "What's always this?" "This," I said, gesturing between us. "You finding something tiny and twisting it into proof. You interrogating me. You making me defend myself against something you made up." He shook his head fast, almost frantic. "That's not fair. Any woman would want to know." Any woman. Like my boundaries were unnatural. Like my dignity was suspicious. I set my mug down. "Mark, you knew Emily got a new phone. You were there." His face tightened. "I forgot." "You forgot," I repeated softly, like testing the taste of the lie. "You forgot because you were too busy imagining me cheating to think logically." He stood up again, agitation rising. "Don't turn this into something bigger than it is." That was the most dangerous sentence in our house, because it was always bigger than it was. Always. And I felt it then, a memory flickering behind my eyes, not of one incident, but of hundreds. The slow build, the pattern, the way my life had quietly narrowed to fit inside his paranoia. Mark's voice kept going, but my mind started pulling threads. And once you start pulling threads, you can't pretend you don't feel the fabric unravel. That afternoon, after Emily's practice, she called me directly. This time from her new phone, her name popped up on the screen. Mark was in the living room, restless, pacing like a man who'd just seen his reflection and didn't like what it showed. I took the call in this hallway, shutting the door to my bedroom, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted my daughter's voice without Mark's shadow in the background. "Mom," Emily said immediately, "I'm sorry." My throat tightened. "You don't need to be sorry." "I didn't mean to cause drama," she rushed. I needed you to hear it." I closed my eyes. "You didn't cause anything. Your dad did." There was silence, Emily breathing, like she was bracing herself. "He's been acting weird all day," she said quietly. "He's been crying." I leaned against the wall. "He keeps saying he's a terrible father," she added. "He said you're probably going to leave him now." The way she said it, flat, resigned, made my chest ache. "What do you think?" I asked her. Emily didn't answer right away. Then she said, voice small but steady, "I think he needs help." Professional help, she didn't say, but it was there between the words like a truth she was too young to have to carry. "This isn't normal," she continued. "None of my friends' dads do this. None of my friends' parents do this. Mom, it feels like he's always waiting for you to mess up so he can prove something." My eyes burned, and it made me furious. Furious that my daughter had learned how to analyze emotional abuse before she'd even finished high school. "I've suggested therapy," I admitted, more than once. Emily let out a humorless sound. "He thinks therapy is for guilty people." I swallowed hard, because that was true. Mark had said it with this smug certainty, like it was a moral rule, like seeking help was an admission of wrongdoing, and therefore he would never do it, because in his mind, he was always the one being wronged. Emily hesitated. "Are you going to leave him?" The question hit me like cold water. I stared at the carpet, at the tiny lint and dust that suddenly looked like evidence of how long I'd been standing still in my life. "I don't know," I said honestly. Emily's voice cracked. "I don't want you to be sad forever." And that, more than Mark's accusations, more than the humiliation, more than the constant suspicion, was what finally made something inside me harden into clarity. Because I wasn't just living with his paranoia. I was raising children inside it. I love you, I whispered into the phone. I love you too, Emily said. Please, just don't let him make you think you're the problem. We hung up. I stood there for a moment, phone pressed to my ear even after the line went dead, like I could keep her bravery inside me if I held on long enough. Then I walked back into the living room. Mark looked up at me too quickly, like he'd been waiting for the verdict. Was that Emily? He asked. Yes, he swallowed. What did she say? I stared at him, because I could tell him the truth. I could tell him our daughter was scared, that she thought he was out of control, that she wanted therapy, that she didn't want to live in a house where love came with surveillance. But I knew how Mark would react. He'd call her dramatic. He'd call her disrespectful. He'd call me a manipulator for turning the kids against him. So instead, I said something simpler. She said she's tired, I told him, and she's not the only one. Mark's eyes narrowed. So now you're ganging up on me. There it was, the pivot. The way he could take a moment where he'd been caught, red-handed, humiliatingly wrong, and still reshape it so he was the injured party. I'm not ganging up on you, I said quietly. I'm waking up. He stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. Lauren, he said, voice dropping into that tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. You have to understand. That text, it looked bad. I stepped closer. Mark, I said, if your first instinct is always to believe the worst about me, what exactly are we doing here? He opened his mouth, and for a second, just a second, I saw fear flash across his face. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing control of the story. Because if I wasn't the accused, then he had to face who he'd been. And Mark had spent 5 years building an entire reality to avoid that. He took a breath, then said the line that always made my skin go cold. Well, maybe if you weren't so secretive. I blinked slowly. Secretive? I repeated. Mark lifted his hands, palms out, like he was offering logic. You're always private. You don't tell me everything. I felt my mouth go dry, because I realized fully, clearly, that this was the loop. If I shared, he'd accuse me anyway. If I didn't share, he'd accuse me harder. There was no winning, no proving innocence, no finishing the trial. Just a life spent answering charges that never ended. I stared at him and said very calmly, I gave you every password I had. He scoffed. And yet you still hide things. You track my location, I continued. You check my phone. You dig through my messages. What secrets could I possibly have left? Mark's gaze sharpened, almost triumphant. The ones you're hiding, he said. And in that moment, I finally understood what it meant to be trapped in someone's paranoia. You can't prove a negative. You can't show someone evidence of something that doesn't exist. And you can't build a life with someone who needs you guilty to justify their fear. Mark stood there waiting for me to react, waiting for tears, shouting, pleading. But I didn't give him any of that. I just picked up my coffee mug again, took one slow sip, and let the silence sit between us like a blade. Because somewhere deep inside me, a decision was forming. Not loud, not dramatic, just inevitable. For a long time after that conversation, nothing happened. That's the part people don't understand when they hear stories like this. They expect a door slam, a screaming match, some cinematic breaking point where one person storms out and the truth finally gets air. But most breaking points don't explode. They settle. They sink into the bones. That night, Mark moved through the house like a man trying not to wake a sleeping animal. He didn't apologize, not really. He hovered, asked if I was okay in that careful voice that wasn't concern so much as damage control. I said I was fine. That lie came easily, too easily, because fine had been my default for years. If you asked Mark when the mistrust started, he'd probably tell you it was 5 years ago. He'd frame it as intuition, as something he felt before he could prove it. If you asked me, I'd tell you it started the first time he asked to borrow my phone. We were sitting on the couch, casual, comfortable. He'd forgotten his charger in the bedroom and asked if he could use mine. I handed it over without thinking. A few minutes later, I glanced over and noticed his thumb wasn't scrolling aimlessly. It was precise, controlled. He wasn't looking at a video or an article. He was in my messages. I remember laughing softly and saying, you can just ask me if you're curious about something. He smiled back. I was just making sure. Sure of what? I didn't ask. I wish I had. Because that moment was small enough to excuse, easy to dismiss, a seed that didn't look dangerous yet. After that, it became background noise. Mark would pick up my phone and scroll absent-mindedly, ask who someone was, why a coworker was texting late, why a number wasn't saved. At first, I answered everything, cheerfully, transparently. I thought openness would soothe whatever fear he was carrying. It didn't. It trained him. He learned that suspicion earned him access. That accusation opened doors. Within a year, he wasn't asking anymore. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the glow of my phone reflected on the ceiling. Mark sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through my emails while I pretended to be asleep. When I confronted him, he said, "If you've got nothing to hide, why does it bother you?" That sentence should come with a warning label, because it sounds reasonable until you realize it makes privacy itself a crime. The accusations grew more creative over time. Once, he accused me of cheating with my dentist because I got text reminders for appointments. Another time, he interrogated me for an hour about a woman from work who had liked one of my LinkedIn posts. "Do you talk to her a lot?" "She's on my team." "Does she know you're taken?" I laughed then, nervously. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He went through 3 years of bank statements looking for suspicious purchases. Every coffee receipt was examined. Every lunch out questioned. He installed tracking software on my phone without telling me. I only found out because my battery started draining unusually fast. When I confronted him with the app pulled up on my screen, he didn't deny it. "I just wanted peace of mind," he said. "You're making this a big deal." I removed it. 2 days later, he asked why my phone wasn't sharing my location anymore. I tried reasoning, explaining. I laid out logic like breadcrumbs, hoping he'd follow them back to reality. I showed him my messages, my emails, my calendar. I walked him through my workdays in exhausting detail. It never mattered. Every explanation just led to another question, another angle, another hypothetical scenario where I could have cheated if I'd wanted to badly enough. I learned something chilling during those years. In Mark's mind, innocence wasn't the absence of guilt. It was the absence of opportunity. And since opportunity can always be imagined, I was never truly innocent. Our son Daniel saw it before I did. He was 19 when he chose a college across the country. I remember standing in his bedroom, surrounded by half-packed boxes, asking why he'd picked a school so far away when there were good options closer to home. He hesitated, then said quietly, "I can't keep watching Dad do this to you." The words landed like a punch I didn't brace for. "He's destroying you," Daniel added, "and I don't know how to stop it." Mark brushed it off later, called Daniel dramatic, said teenagers exaggerated everything. But the truth was simple. Our son fled. Not for freedom, for survival. By the time Emily was 16, she'd grown up fluent in tension. She knew how to read moods, how to tell when Mark was spiraling, how to warn me with a look across the room. That's what finally shattered something in me. Not the accusations, not the surveillance, not even the humiliation. It was realizing my children had learned how to navigate fear inside their own home. And still, I stayed, because leaving felt bigger than enduring. Because I kept hoping Mark would wake up. That logic would win. That love would override paranoia. That morning in the kitchen, the text, the call, Emily's voice breaking through his certainty. It wasn't the first incident. It was just the first time his paranoia exposed itself without me cushioning the fall. And once that happened, there was no pretending this was a misunderstanding anymore. It was a pattern, one that had been tightening around us for 5 years. And I was finally done pretending I could loosen it by myself. The day after the kitchen incident, Mark acted like a man who'd narrowly escaped disaster. He brought home takeout from my favorite place, asked if I wanted to watch a show together, laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, touched my shoulder in passing, like physical proximity could reset the clock. I let it happen. Not because I believed him, but because I needed to see what he would do next. That's the thing about patterns. Once you see them clearly, you don't need to provoke anything. You just wait. And Mark never disappointed. It started with my phone password. I changed it on a Tuesday afternoon while sitting in my car outside the grocery store. No announcement, no drama, just a quiet decision made with shaking hands. That evening, Mark noticed immediately. "What's your new password?" he asked casually, like he was asking for the time. I didn't look up from the counter. "It's private." The word landed like a slap. His smile vanished. "Excuse me?" I said it's private. He stared at me, disbelief bleeding into anger. "You're hiding something." "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting my privacy." "There's no privacy in a relationship," he snapped. "There is when one person abuses access," I replied. That's when he lost it. The meltdown was fast and ugly. Accusations flying, voice rising, hands gesturing wildly as he paced the kitchen like a prosecutor without a jury. "How am I supposed to trust you if you lock me out?" "What kind of girlfriend does that?" "Only guilty people need passwords." I listened, calm, detached, almost curious. Because I realized something terrifying in that moment. He didn't want reassurance. He wanted control. When shouting didn't work, he shifted strategies. The next morning, my phone was locked for an hour. He tried to guess the password too many times. I was just checking, he said when I confronted him. If you weren't hiding anything, this wouldn't be a problem. I told him my work email was none of his business. He called my office anyway. Not directly. He was smarter than that. He framed it as concern. My girlfriend's been acting strange, he told the receptionist. I just wanted to make sure she's really where she says she is. HR called me in that afternoon. Lauren, they said gently, we received a call from your partner asking about your schedule and the employees you work with. My face burned. They documented it as inappropriate interference, warned me quietly that repeated incidents could become a professional issue. I drove home shaking. Mark was waiting. They were very rude, he said. Acted like I was doing something wrong. You did do something wrong, I replied. He scoffed. If you weren't being secretive... I didn't let him finish. I am done justifying my existence to you. The words surprised us both. That's when he escalated. He started showing up. At my lunch breaks, at after-work meetings. Once, unannounced during a client presentation. Each time with the same grin, the same excuse. I was just in the area. Thought I'd surprise you. Can't a man visit his girlfriend? People started asking questions. I started documenting. Screenshots, dates, times, emails. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't warn him. I just watched. The private investigator approached me on a Thursday. I was leaving the gym when a man stepped into my path. Not aggressive, just uncomfortable. Ms. Whitmore, he asked quietly. My name is Thomas. I need to speak with you. My heart pounded. He held up his hands. I'm not here to scare you. Your boyfriend hired me to follow you. I laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. You're joking. I wish I were, he said. But this doesn't feel right. You go to work. The gym. Home. That's it. He handed me a card. I'm returning his money, he added, and I recommend you document everything. This kind of behavior escalates. Then he walked away. I sat in my car for 10 minutes afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, because something in me finally snapped into place. This wasn't insecurity. This was obsession. Mark didn't deny it when I confronted him. I just wanted confirmation, he said. You're acting like I'm crazy. I stared at him. I don't feel safe, I said quietly. That word safe changed everything. He laughed. You're being dramatic. I thought of Emily, of Daniel, of the way my children had learned to shrink. No, I said, I've been minimizing. That night, Mark tried to enlist Emily. Just check your mom's phone when she's asleep, he told her. She won't even know. Emily came to me in tears. That's sick, she said. I'm not spying on you. Mark accused her of choosing sides. Daniel called me from college after Mark contacted him. He wants me to convince you to give him your passwords, Daniel said. He says that's what loving partners do. I closed my eyes. And what did you tell him? I asked. That he needs therapy, Daniel replied. He hung up on me. I met with a lawyer the following week. I brought everything. The calls, the screenshots, the PI's card, HR documentation. The lawyer didn't look surprised. This is coercive control, she said calmly, and it's escalating. I nodded. I already knew. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was how far Mark would go to prove himself right. Because paranoia doesn't stop when it's exposed. It adapts. And Mark was about to make the mistake that would finally end everything. Mark didn't get quieter after that. He got smarter. At least he thought he did. There was a strange calm that settled over him in the days after I told him I didn't feel safe. He stopped yelling. Stopped showing up at my work. Stopped asking for my phone outright. If I hadn't lived with him for years, I might have mistaken it for growth. Instead, it felt like the stillness before something calculated. He started watching me again, but from a distance, observing, waiting. Like a man convinced that if he just stayed patient enough, the truth would finally betray me. And then one night my phone buzzed. Unknown profile, new message request. Hey, you look familiar. Do we know each other? I stared at the screen. Not because I was tempted, but because I knew him. The phrasing was off in a way only someone who'd shared a bed with you for years would recognize. The punctuation, the rhythm, the casual, false intimacy. It was Mark. I didn't answer right away. I took a screenshot. Then another when the profile updated its bio. Female name, smiling photo, that looked just believable enough to pass at a glance. A woman who didn't exist. I sat on the couch, heart pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. So this was his new plan. If he couldn't catch me cheating, he'd create the opportunity and watch what I did with it. I replied, I don't think so. Who is this? The response came quickly. Jessica, I think we met at a conference. I almost laughed. Which conference? I typed. The one in Chicago last month. I hadn't been to Chicago in 2 years. I let the lie hang there for a moment, then typed back. Oh, right, that one. Hook set. Over the next few days, Jessica messaged me constantly. Compliments, casual flirtation, gentle nudges toward something more. Mark had always believed he was subtle. He wasn't. He wrote the way he always wrote, over-explaining, trying too hard to sound relaxed, asking questions that were really traps. I answered carefully, never initiated, never crossed a line. But I let it look possible. And while he was busy building his case, I was documenting everything. Screenshots, message timestamps, profile metadata. I noticed something almost poetic. The fake profile's birthday? Our anniversary. Same date, same year. Not subtle at all. The night he confronted me, Mark could barely contain himself. He paced the living room, energy vibrating off him like he'd finally won a prize. Is there anything you want to tell me? He asked. I looked up from my book. About what? He smiled. That smile was pure triumph. About Jessica. I closed the book slowly. Jessica? Don't play dumb, he said. I know you've been talking to her. I tilted my head. You mean the woman who thinks I was at a conference I never attended? His smile flickered. What? I recognized your writing style immediately, I continued calmly. You also forgot to change the birthday from our anniversary. His face went pale. That doesn't... And the profile was created from your laptop, I finished, from our home IP address. Silence swallowed the room. Mark stared at me like the floor had just dropped out from under him. You were flirting with her, he said desperately. You were flirting with another woman. With you pretending to be someone else, I replied. That's not cheating. That's you trying to manufacture proof. I was testing you, he snapped. And you failed, I said. I slid my phone across the table toward him. I have everything. Messages, metadata, screenshots, including the ones where you encouraged the conversation. His hands shook as he stared at the screen. This is beyond paranoia, I said softly. You're trying to create a betrayal so you don't have to face your own behavior. Mark's voice cracked. You're divorcing me for this? I'm leaving, I said, because I can't live on trial anymore. 3 days later, I served him the papers. The explosion was spectacular. He told everyone I was leaving him for Jessica, insisted I'd had an emotional affair with him, demanded I pay for his therapy now that I was abandoning him. He tried to show the kids his evidence. That backfired instantly. Dad, Emily said after I showed her the screenshots, you catfished Mom. That's insane. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He just said, you need help. The divorce dragged, but the truth didn't. Years of accusations, the PI, the workplace harassment, the fake profile. Even his lawyer suggested therapy as part of the settlement. Mark refused. Admitting I need therapy makes me look crazy, he said. The judge wasn't sympathetic. Emily chose to live with me. Daniel wrote a letter to the court about growing up under constant suspicion, about watching his mother be interrogated for every text. By the time it was over, Mark was living with his sister, still telling anyone who would listen that I must have cheated, because no innocent woman leaves a man for just checking her phone. The irony? He's already dating someone new. Met her online. Emily showed me his posts about trust, about transparency, about how his new girlfriend hides nothing. I hope she knows what she's walking into. But that's not my problem anymore. The kids are healing. Emily's in therapy. She says it helps. Daniel visits more now that he doesn't have to watch his father interrogate me. As for me, I still flinch sometimes when my phone buzzes. 20 years of being treated like a suspect doesn't fade overnight. But I can use my phone in peace now. I can exist without defending myself. And the strangest part? If Mark had trusted that first text, just for 1 second, he would have learned it was our daughter asking for help. Instead, his paranoia exposed itself in front of the very person who needed him to face it. He spent years searching for evidence of betrayal that didn't exist. In the end, the only person who betrayed our family was him.